In this lesson, I want to circle back to the one built-in configuration setting that we didn't cover a few sections back when we discussed device configuration, the custom setting. Now, you might recall from the lecture on configurations and declarations that these profiles are made up of XML dictionaries in key value pairs that define a setting for a given config. Apple actually has developer documentation that you can read through, and I've linked to that in the lesson resources. And here's an example of it right here. And on the left-hand side, you'll see we have all these different sections: AirPlay, App Management, App Store, really all the different configurations that you can do, and then all the breakdowns of the payloads right underneath them. So let's go ahead and take a look at this App Store one that I have pulled up here. And this is the one that governs the Mac App Store in particular and the restrictions around it. And you can see right here it's called App Store, and it says the payload that configures macOS App Store restrictions. It also shows here that it requires macOS 10.9 or later. And if we look at the properties here, it actually defines 4 different things that you can actually set for this particular payload, but one of them is actually deprecated, which means that it's not going to work if your Mac is running 10.14 or later. So that's a good thing to look for here, depending on which version of macOS you're running on your endpoints. Some of these may have applied at one point and have been replaced and are just no longer supported, and that's the case here. But we've got 3 of these we can actually look at. Disable software update notifications. And let's look at that one first here. This is a Boolean, which means that it's a true or false. And what it gives us is some information here about it. So if set to true, the system will disable software update notifications available in macOS 10.10 or later. So again, we see a new minimum OS. So the whole profile applies to 10.9, but if you're looking at this particular payload, you actually need to be on 10.10 or later. We've also got restrict App Store, disable app adoption, and it talks about that one. And it shows that the default is false, but we can turn it on to true and have it change this behavior. And then down here at the bottom, restrict App Store software update only. And if this is true, it prevents the App Store from launching. So if you want to just turn off the App Store for your users, you can go ahead and do that. And by default, it's false, which means that the App Store obviously is available. Now, if you scroll down here a little further, you'll see a profile example. And what this is the raw XML that you can use as a reference to write our own custom profile for these particular keys. So you can see here, disable software update notifications, true. Restrict software update app adoption, true. So that's what it will look like if you were turning those on. So let's go ahead and take a look at a profile that I wrote using 2 of these keys. Disable software update notifications and restrict store software update only. So let's go ahead and open that up. I have it right here on my desktop, and we can open it in Xcode here and see it in code. So it looks very similar to the example that Apple provided. It's got some additional information here, such as the display name and the identifier, and we'll get into that in a little bit later in the next lesson. But what we have here is those 2 key value pairs. Disable software update notification is true, and restrict software update only is also set to true. We'll minimize that out. Now, if we want to deploy this to our managed Macs, all we need to do is create a custom profile and upload this particular XML file. So let's go ahead and do that together. Switch over to Apple Business, and we're going to go back to Devices, and we're going to go down here to Configurations, and we'll just choose to browse all configurations. And the one that we want here is custom configuration, and we'll hit the plus here. And let's go ahead and name it. In this case, I'm going to call it Mac App Store Restriction. And it just says, let's go ahead and choose a file that ends in .mobile config. So we'll do that. And we've got this one on my desktop here that I had created. So let's go ahead and upload that. And we can put a little note in here that's only going to be visible inside Apple Business. No problem. We'll just go ahead and hit next here. And it just checks to make sure it actually found at least one payload, and it did. And we can actually expand that out. It'll show that it's an actual App Store payload, and it warns us here that it's not allowed in user enrollment and it's macOS only. So we know that you need to be a supervised device, so a company-owned device in this case, to be able to install and restrict with this profile. and that's fine. That's the way our Macs are set up. And we can also click on View Profile Payload, and it'll show us the XML here, just like what we saw earlier inside Xcode. So this looks good. Let's go ahead and hit Save here to save this custom profile. And now our configuration has been added. And just like we do with any of the built-in ones, we have to go ahead and add it to our blueprint for it to take effect. So we'll go back to Blueprints, we'll go to our test blueprint, and we'll go to Configurations, we'll hit Edit, and Mac App Store Restrictions. We'll add that one and we'll save it. All right, now let's go ahead and jump over to our test Mac and see how this has actually changed the Mac's behavior. Okay, so we're over here on our test Mac, and one issue we're going to have is that we won't actually be able to wait around and see if it will or won't send us App Store notifications. But we can go ahead and view the assigned profile in System Settings and see if it's applied. So let's just go ahead and go to System Settings here once. And we'll scroll down to Device Management. And here is our restriction. macOS App Store restriction. If we double click on it to get more information, it's going to show restricted software updates true and disable software update notifications true. So it looks like it's applied. So I've got, about 99% certainty here that we're not going to get those notifications because it looks like it's successfully applied that setting. So that's a good way for us to just make sure that our XML was parsed properly and it was written correctly. Let's go ahead and hit OK here. Now, one thing we can do is actually try to use the App Store, and that's going to tell us pretty quickly if it's actually restricting it. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just go ahead and open up the Mac App Store app here. And instead of launching, it actually gives us this message. You don't have permission to use the App Store. So for more information, contact the person who set up your account, which is kind of funny. It doesn't say contact tech support, but that's fine. That's essentially what we wanted to see. We're not able to get into the App Store at all at this point. So what's cool about this particular configuration is that if you're using a third-party app catalog like Automata Deploy, you can effectively disable the Mac App Store and then point your users to the Automata Software Center app to find the applications that you want them to install. And this is really ideal for organizations that utilize managed Apple accounts and still want to offer some level of a curated self-service app installation for their end users. It also allows you to control exactly what apps they're installing in your environment rather than just giving them the entire App Store to go crazy with. Now, clearly, setting up these custom settings is an advanced process, but it does allow you to extend the capabilities of Apple Business in ways beyond what's actually just built in. Now, there's a variety of utilities out there that can assist you in creating these custom configuration profiles, and in the next lesson, we're going to take a look at one that's going to help simplify this entire process.